and welcome to this brand new season of Leaders of Tomorrow, the only enabling platform for small businesses. Over the past 7 years, we've understood what matters the most to you, the entrepreneur. And in our 8th year, we're taking head on 2 of your most pressing concerns, that are funding and mentoring. I'm Sunanda Jayaseelan. Tonight, I'm bringing you an exclusive conversation with Rekha Menon of Accenture. She's the chairman and senior MD at the company. I asked her what it means really to be a company in today's age, which is digital first, what entrepreneurs should do to succeed, what her advice is for women entrepreneurs watching this interview, and also the big picture when it comes to the regulatory framework. Here's what she had to say. Listen. Rekha, thank you so much for joining us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure talking to someone who's seen so many changes and at the same time is so closely involved with the innovation that is really taking place in India and Bharat. And I want to start there. I want to talk about innovation. I want to talk about the fact that you as a person, as well as you in your role at Accenture, are so closely involved with innovation. Are you happy with what you're seeing in terms of entrepreneurs who are involved with innovation and the changes that you're really seeing there?
One word answer, yes.
Okay.
And yes,
Fantastic.
and yes.
Okay.
Because if you see what's happening, especially in the last few years, the innovation quotient has gone up dramatically. I mean, really dramatically. Did you know that India is the 3rd largest startup hub for technology? 3rd largest in the world.
Anywhere in the world. Great.
Right?
Okay.
Which is fantastic to see, right? And what's also happening is it creates a virtual cycle. So as we're, once a few startups start, just like what happened in Silicon Valley, there are more that come in. And the important one is that it's not just happening for corporate India, it's also happening, as you said, for Bharat. So there's a lot of innovation going on which will impact Bharat as a whole, not just technology innovation, which are meant for niche players or B2B players.
What do you think it's going to take then to, have that innovation at scale? For instance, we're a country where we've seen Aadhaar. We're a country that sees the kind of elections that we have, which is an innovation of its kind because it's the largest in the world.
World's largest elections, yes.
But we don't seem to have been able to scale a lot of the innovations that we have here in India. What do you think it's going to take? What is holding us back? You're saying we're the 3rd largest base and it's clearly taken us a bit of time. What's it going to take to become maybe the world's best startup innovation center?
So there are multiple things that have to happen. There's no silver bullet, right? And there's no one answer. And it's a combination of many players. One, from the government, which means creating enabling regulatory policies that allow startups to flourish and get funding and fail, right? Because they will fail. By nature, you're taking risks and there will be failure. So allowing for that to happen.
Sure.
Second, funding. Startups need funding, and so making it easier and more funding coming in. Third, ecosystem of players which learn from each other. And then, of course, larger corporate houses supporting smaller startups in many different ways, whether it's mentorship or funding or bringing them in or sharing good practices or bringing them into their fold and working with them with the startup ecosystem. So it's many different things that have to happen that will allow for many more startups and much more innovation, along with the education system.
Okay, let's break down each of those, and I want to reference Bharat. A lot of the experts who come on the show argue that the challenges that India has lie in the offline world, lie in the real world, so to speak, and therefore the solutions also have to be offline solutions, can't necessarily be technology solutions. Do you think that a marriage of the two is possible, which is what we're seeing in a lot of cases, but do you think that more and more of that needs to happen?
So yeah, I mean, it's not a simplistic answer of an either or that, more offline solutions, real solutions have to happen.
Sure.
Technology is a massive enabler, right? And we are beginning to see that technology can amplify the impact, and also create change. I mean, multiple examples. If you see what's happening just take 2 sectors, 3 sectors, okay, now that I'm at it, where technology is helping for Bharat.
Sure.
One, take education, right? With with technology help, education is getting democratized. It is reaching out. The same content which was available only to the elite in urban India is now starting to reach out across. And it's technology that's enabling that. And that can be offline, that can be different modules, it can be teacher training, whatever. If you take healthcare, whether it is telemedicine or remote healthcare practices, it's reaching out now to rural India where it wasn't possible earlier, right? Sure. Access to the best medical help. It's coming, it's happening, right? There are lots of little innovations that are being done for that. And the third, agriculture, precision agriculture with the help of AI and IoT and cloud is beginning to happen. And we are seeing different states starting to embrace that. So I'm just giving you 3 big examples of areas that we always talk about that India needs, right? Which is education, healthcare, and agriculture. And I'm saying that it's a combination. It has to be a combination to provide the solutions.
Okay. You at Accenture, despite the kind of size and scale that the company is, also encourage your employees to think like entrepreneurs and innovators. Just run us through that. What does that involve? What does encouraging for a company of your size, encouraging your employees to still continue thinking, out of the box, and to use this platform to really talk to our entrepreneurs about maybe a few things that you'd want them to keep in mind.
Okay, so let me talk about our journey first. So yes, you're right. We're a large organization, which at times therefore can get very hard and get stuck in its own ship, right? And it's hard to change a ship. So one, it has to come from the top. And there has to be a commitment that we are going to build an innovative organization, embed innovation in our DNA, which also means that it is not being done on the sidelines somewhere. There's not one group which is doing innovation while the rest of the organization is. And I do meet a few people who talk about we'll set up an innovation lab, but what is the rest of the organization doing? So you have to get the entire organization thinking, believing, breathing innovation. 2, we've set up what we call an innovation architecture. It's like setting up it's like a strategy, right? And when you do a strategy and you do a business process, you're going to set up elements of it and the building blocks of it. So we have a complete innovation architecture which starts from our research to our labs to actually testing things out in our liquid studios in small, quick win ways and failing fast and then taking it to scale. So it doesn't just happen like that. And that then creates a whole cycle of innovation where you're saying that it's okay, you may fail, come up with the ideas. So we've done that across, many different ways. To your second question, what should organizations do? Similar, I would say, and make sure that it is not, as I said, I can't repeat it enough, it's not the job of some side organization or some subgroup which is actually responsible for innovation. You also constantly have to be testing the market, which also means you have to be open to looking outside and constantly learning from the networks that are around you, because innovation is going to come from many different angles, and when you look at it from many different angles is when you're going to get it, right? So it can't just be restricted to the product innovation, which is typically what people look at, but what is the innovation that you're doing in your entire business process itself? And that is more that's less disruptible if you're going to look at innovation in your supply chain or innovation in your process itself, and then you're building for the long term in that.
Okay. While innovation and disruption, people love using those terms, and they're definitely big words. What does it mean to you? What does innovation mean to you?
Interesting question. Innovation to me means looking at anything from a different lens, and then thinking. And it could be an incremental small thing and providing that from what hadn't been done before. So we have the big disruptive innovation, but we also have the small ones, right, that are happening. If you just take India, for example, just 2 different startups I'll name. Take Paperboat, which got into the juices space, which is very everybody does juices. One more soft drink, but they thought innovatively on the Indian palate, and then within that they even change regional variations. So the buttermilk that you get in the north is different from the buttermilk you get in the south. And then they went further and said during a South Indian festival there's something that they call panakam, which only is given for 3 days. Right? That's innovation. That's thinking through every element of it. Right? you have a completely different area where you're looking at adjacent spaces, Slice Pay, which is another Indian startup, which is looking at banking for the unbanked students, looking at providing credit facilities for students. And they are looking at data from the social media posts of students. They're looking at their posts of where they eat and what movie they watch and what vacations they take. Now that's a very adjacent way of thinking, saying how does this help? But they're looking at that to provide data to see if they're creditworthy. So that's just two random examples, but there are many more of these.
We take a very quick break on that note. On the other side, I'll continue bringing you the key highlights and takeaways from that exclusive conversation with Rekha Menon of Accenture. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow tonight, bringing you highlights of a very fascinating interview and an exclusive interview that I did with Rekha Menon of Accenture. Let's talk skilling. NASSCOM came out with a survey 3 or 4 years ago where it said that only 25% of all students coming out of colleges today have the skill sets for the jobs which they're applying for. How do you think that's possibly going to change?
So it's a continuous process. One, there is, in the current environment where there's so many changes happening, and there's a combinatorial effect of technology and changes that are going on, the skills that are going to be needed for the future, definitely you're right, are different from the skills needed in the past. And how is that going to change means it starts from the education system itself, the curriculum itself. Okay. And we're working with a lot of academics, NASSCOM itself is doing that, and other industry bodies, to look at how do you build skills for the future. How do you make sure that there's modular learning, because what you learn now may be redundant 10 years later, right? So how do you build modular learning? How do you build continuous learning, right? And the skills that are going to be needed is technology skills, but human plus skills also, right? With the changes that are going on. And all of us are focused on it because the question is about making sure that you have an agile workforce, that people are constant learners. So it's not a one-stop thing that what are the new skills, let's learn it today, and then I'm done. It doesn't work. I mean, I still learn at this age.
Okay. For an entrepreneur who's watching this interview, for a small business that's watching this interview, to say, if I'm training these students who are coming into the roles for which they're applying, it's costing me money. And that's a cost that as a small business I can ill afford to take on. What's your advice?
So I would say look at a couple of options. One, a lot of material is now available online. Udacity, Coursera, all of these are free or cheaply priced, very, very competitively priced. Those are great, actually absolutely great. There's a lot of learning available there. So encourage your people to go and do those modules. I mean, we in Accenture encourage our people to go and take some of those modules. So that's one. Curate it for them if you have to, but that's one option, which is cheap. You don't have to spend money, or if you do, it's a very minimal amount. Second, a lot of the industry bodies, because they recognize it's a big issue, are focusing on skilling. And third, don't assume that it has to be learning like this. The learning can also happen through networking with other entrepreneurs, other mid-sized companies, to figure out what's going on in the environment. That's massive learning, right? Mentorship is massive learning. So join those startup networks and learn from there. But as long as the base point is the culture has to be continuous learning, and that's what has to be encouraged.
Okay. Since we're talking about skilling, I want to talk about the role of the government when it comes to entrepreneurs, and I only want to look at the big picture without going into details of what perhaps needs to change. My question to you is, and we pose this to experts like yourself very often on the Leaders of Tomorrow, about the role of the government in the life of an entrepreneur, hands off or involved deeply with business. On what side of the argument are you?
The middle path. No, but seriously.
Sure.
So the government can be an enabler, because there are regulatory policies that can hamper or help entrepreneurs,
Okay.
right? If I look back many years ago when the IT industry was just starting in India, it was startups, right? At that time, the government helped with setting up the tax policies, which was STPI and special zones, which helped the IT industry, and now it's a $167 billion export that we do, and that was where it helped, and then it got out of the way, right? So it means doing both, right? It means looking at what different policies will the startups need, because some of the policies are set for large organizations. Startups are a very different animal, right? So what is it that they need, which will help them? Second could be also in enabling funding, and then enabling failures, because startups will fail.
Sure.
So again, it's the middle path.
Okay, as we're running out of time on this interview, I want to devote this last leg of our conversation to women entrepreneurs and to women in business and women in corporate India. You've had quite a journey as a woman leader, being one amongst, say, 1,500 or so male employees, and having to really establish yourself. What has that experience taught you? If in one line you could use this platform to advise women entrepreneurs watching this interview about what has worked for you and what you want to leave them with.
What has worked for me is one, a strong sense of self-belief, that it doesn't matter you're a man or a woman. If you're good, you're good, right? Second, asking for what you need, charting your own path, and then asking for help where you need it, and charting your own path, negotiating for your space, and women tend to have to do that. And so those would be the things I'd say for the women. But I'd also then, since I have the platform, talk about from the other side what it means, because it also means that the organizations themselves then have to look at how do we encourage women, right? In our case, Accenture took a stand saying we'll be gender neutral, which is 50-50 globally by 2025. And that started from the top. That was the leadership commitment that our CEO made.
Sure.
And then, so there's a leadership commitment that has to happen. There have to be enabling policies that happen. And then there has to be a culture of equality. So all of that helps all across.
Okay, 90% of the life of an entrepreneur is about raising funding. At least that's where most of their energy and time is spent. And women entrepreneurs we speak with say that less than and this, we have research and reports that say that in 2018, less than 5% of all funding that came into the ecosystem went into women-fund businesses, women-owned and run businesses. What do you think is going to change that?
So yes, that's a reality. And the other part of the same research that you're talking about said that the same ideas, when pitched to women VCs, got funded. So women fund women got funded. And that has to change, because an idea is an idea and is an idea, right? Okay. It doesn't matter if it's by a woman or a man, right? If it's a good idea. And that has to change. So I think we have to put that conversation on the table and share the data and talk about it. So that's one. Get VCs aware, or get funding agencies aware that they are losing out on a big economic opportunity. And there's again data to prove that on the $1 trillion that could get created if more women joined the workforce, more women
Absolutely.
became entrepreneurs. So it's not a let's do it because it's a nice thing to do for women. It's an economic opportunity loss. So it's a business loss. So let's put it from that terms and have those conversations, which will then shift and get more funding. Let's also provide surround sound systems. So again, back to Accenture, we co-founded something called WeConnect, which actually looks at, which actually supports and works with minority and women entrepreneurs and links them up as vendors to the rest of the ecosystem, right? So that's one example of a surround sound that has to happen. And then third is that the women themselves should get together and ask.
Okay. I also want to understand from you then, there are several policies that have been put into place which benefit women and women entrepreneurs and women in corporate India. Do you think perhaps that there could be some concern on the part of the environment and the ecosystem in terms of hiring women then? Because they feel that perhaps it could go against them, it could be loss of productivity, etc. Is that a fair concern to have?
From my perspective, and from our perspective, and from any perspective, not utilizing 50% of the talent available is an economic and a business loss. So that's the economic argument, right? It's not about anything else. Second, we talked about innovation earlier, right? And you cannot be innovative if you don't have diversity, right? In order to have innovation, you have to have diverse points of view to come in. And that's where, therefore, not just gender, but a diverse point of view. So therefore, different elements of the society have to be represented in your organization, and only then can you be innovative. So that's the second argument, right? And the third argument, of course, is that if you're saying that by giving women some of these enabling mechanisms, you're going to lose out and it'll fear, in the long run it will not, because it more than adds value. We've got enough data to show that where women are in leadership, those companies financially perform better. So
sure,
I'm not making an emotional argument, I'm making a business argument here.
Sure. As we're closing this interview down then, my question to you is, and we love asking business leaders like yourself who join us on the Leaders of Tomorrow about why perhaps it's important and crucial for leaders and for owners of businesses and entrepreneurs to have passions outside of work. And maybe you can let us into what, your own hobby
so
or your passion is.
I was just going to stop and say, how can you not?
Okay.
Because to me it is that, and I can speak only for myself, everybody has different approaches. Life is short. One has to live it to its fullest. I always say take care of your body, mind and soul, and so you have to do things for all three of those elements. And you are a more multi-dimensional human being if you have more than one interest. So
it is essential, and for entrepreneurs who say we don't have the time, you would say make the time for it.
If it's priority, you will make the time for it. Do you have time to brush your teeth? Yes, you do. There'll be a trade-off. You may give up something else. You may give up watching TV, but if you're focusing on yourself or you have some hobby, that will make you a better entrepreneur. It'll spill over into your work.
Rekha, such a pleasure having you here on the Leaders of Tomorrow. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
That wraps up tonight's show. If you have any feedback for us, we love hearing from you. Do get in touch. Our contact details coming up in just a second. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.